Discover Clark Gable's mysterious deathbed desire and enter Hollywood's golden period. Known for his famous roles and charm, Gable's personal life was compelling. The sparkle and splendor didn't change his desire to rest with Carol Lombard, his dearest love. One of Tinseltown's most touching love tales, Lombard's aircraft tragedy ended their relationship. Recent studies show that Gable deliberately selected his resting site close to Lombard to ensure their friendship endured in the afterlife. We'll explore Gable's ascent to prominence, personal challenges, and legacy of love. Discover the man behind the myth and the love tale that captivated a generation via behind-the-scenes stories and uncommon insights. Clark Gable was born. In 1901, William Henry Will Gable and Adeline gave birth to William Clark Gable. Though he was almost named Clark Billy, he ultimately chose to be called after his father. Growing up, he was part of a mixed Catholic and Protestant family of Pennsylvanian, Belgian, German, and Dutch ancestry. However, something noteworthy occurred at the time of his birth. The doctor wrote in such a way that it was almost impossible to see that Gable had been entered into the county registration under the wrong name. Thank goodness a clerk saw and fixed the error before it was too late. Arduous initial days. Even though Gable had a life filled with love and great success, he experienced a lot in his early years. At the age of 10 months, he lost his mother. Her death was attributed to either a brain tumor or an epileptic seizure, as they were unable to identify the cause. He, therefore, had a lot of identity issues as he got older, particularly regarding his religious convictions. He alternated between the Protestant views of his father and his mother's side of the family. Cherished reading. From a very early age, Gable had a great affinity for reading. He took it so seriously that he'd spend days reading Shakespearean plays and reciting sonnets for amusement. His father gave him a collection of 72 books of the world's greatest literature to keep the motivation going. That was a big issue, particularly before social media and the internet. However, his father later revealed that Gable had never read books. Little too germaphobic. Despite his refusal to acknowledge it, Gable's family and friends revealed that he was something of a germaphobe in reality. The thought of sitting in his soiled water seemed to drive him insane, therefore he never took a bath. He found it incomprehensible that anybody could bathe in public or in locations other than their own houses. Gable would never even think about taking a soothing bath. Instead, he would always decide to take many showers throughout the day. Bad breath and missing teeth. Gable's dental luck could have been better. He had many phony ones when he was only 32 years old. That followed a protracted period spent treating a gum infection he sustained in 1933. When he eventually reached the dentist, almost every tooth had to be replaced. Regular foul breath was one of the effects. Vivian Leigh, one of his co-stars in Gone with the Wind, often complained about his foul breath during shooting and hoped he might take action. Different world. Much to everyone's amazement, during the production of Susan Lennox, Her Fall and Rise, Gable and Greta Garbo had virtually little in common. Throughout it all, Greta detested him, and their relationship on television was nothing like their actual one. However, he wasn't thrilled by Garbo either. She became even more irate when he made it apparent that he believed she was a really poor actor. However, despite the less-than-ideal off-screen circumstances, the outcome was so compelling that no one could have predicted it. Tiny Prod. His journey to become a well-known and prosperous actor included some background information and a little encouragement from a relative. Gable was greatly motivated to pursue acting when he was only 17 years old after seeing a performance of The Bird of Paradise. However, he held off on pursuing his acting career until his grandpa provided him with a motivator. His grandfather left him a sizable inheritance that let him go to Hollywood without worrying about becoming bankrupt. His initial wife. Gable's career developed as it did with his first wife, Josephine Dillon. When Gable first met Dylan, he was a stage manager and acting instructor 17 years older than her. She gave his profession the time and money to start from scratch. She gave him training, taught him proper body alignment and posture, hired a dentist to treat his teeth, and even covered the cost of having his hair fixed. She also explained why he needed to lower his voice to achieve in life. Following their marriage in 1924, they relocated to Hollywood. Just a change of career. Gable claims that he never really got married to Josephine Dillon, his manager and wife, in his first marriage. His second wife married him 2 days following their 1930 divorce, since his first marriage was more of a professional route than a loving partner. Ultimately, he would also divorce Maria Franklin Prentice Lucas Langham, despite the earlier claims that he was insanely in love. When Dillon questioned him about a desire for a divorce, Gable was extremely honest. He said that in addition to wanting to be a great actor in Hollywood, he also wanted a wealthy lady to assist him in achieving his goals. Boy in love. The incapacity to quit cheating was one of the characteristics for which Gable would always be recognized. The guy was a chronic cheater, and no matter how serious he took his work, nobody could ever stop him. While still wed to Josephine Dillon, he ultimately met Carol Lombard, who would later become his third wife. On filming the successful silent film The Johnstown Flood in 1926, Gable and Lombard got to know one another. Even though Lombard was only 17 years old at the time and only served as an extra in the film, she left a lasting impact. Furthermore, bad boy. If there was one thing that Gable excelled at, particularly in his early career, it was portraying the antagonist. Gable, for whatever reason, not only loved the roles he played, but excelled in them as well. And since one thing led to another, he was eventually asked to portray largely antagonist roles in the movies at the start of his career. In the movie The Painted Desert of 1931, he played a man who was a nasty guy, scarcely groomed, and had a bad temper. This was his first ever appearance in a talkie. An unlikable character. Gable's performance in the 1943 movie It Happened One Night began his career. He even won an Oscar for Best Actor because of his performance. The film's director drew parallels between the fictional character and the real-life Gable, asserting that the latter was a grounded person with much more potential than just embodying the stereotypical large guy and being the man in his films. He continued by saying that the character's details, extremely similar to Gable's true personality, were the primary reason for the film's popularity. Way he obtained success. At the start of his career, like many others, Gable had to find a way to support himself and was eager to work in various sectors that would help him progress in his profession. He was thus employed as a stage gigolo from the start. That meant that he was having relationships with well-known women who were older and wealthier and could introduce him to a producer or two. For 2 years, he even dated Pauline Frederick, an actress who was 18 years older. Ultimately, she offered him a part in the Madam X revival. Daughter in secret. Gable surreptitiously fathered a daughter in 1935 who spent years hidden from the public view. In actuality, not even a few of his relatives were aware that the kid even existed. The daughter, Judy Lewis, was the offspring of Gable and Loretta Young, his co-star in The Call of the Wild. Lewis had always thought that she'd been adopted by Young, despite the constant whispers to the contrary. It wasn't until 5 years after Gable's death that she realized he was her father. Tense union. Loretta Young reportedly had a solid reason for hiding the information from her daughter before we leaped to any judgments. Following the deaths of Young and Lewis, the family revealed a horrifying revelation. Lewis had been the result of what seemed to be Gable pressuring Young to accept him. Young reportedly told her daughter-in-law that Gable had pushed himself on her years before, causing an unwelcome pregnancy that she chose to retain. She kept this a secret from everyone else out of concern that it would destroy her and Gable's careers. Pappy was loved by her. He was still married when Gable met the person he called the love of his life in 1936. He was certain that Carol Lombard would one day become his wife since he was so enamored with her. He would describe her as charming, young, and among the most reliable individuals to entrust one's life. While Gable was about complimenting Lombard and making him feel special, she also said she adored Pappy, even though he wasn't always the best at everything. Nevertheless, they enjoyed themselves for a sustained amount of time. The wind has gone. Gone with the Wind was the one thing that kept encouraging Gable to swim in the direction of Carol Lombard. After its release, the movie was a big hit and helped Gable join the ranks of Hollywood aristocracy. Gone with the Wind added a new level of prosperity to his already successful profession. Suddenly, he could afford to file for divorce from his second wife, Rhea Langham, so that he may follow his passion for Lombard. How lovely and passionate! From separation to matrimony. After hiring an attorney, Gable brought the divorce papers home. He was prepared to move on, even though he had experienced true love with his second wife. Finally, during a production break while filming Gone with the Wind, on a stunning March 1939 day, Gable tied the knot with Carol Lombard. Gable wasn't prepared to wait the additional 3 weeks for the completion of his divorce from Langham. After all, he'd been waiting for the love of his life for quite some time. The principal position. It's never been proved, but Lombard suggested that Gable play the lead in Gone with the Wind. Surprisingly, Gable declined to read the original work that she had chosen to purchase as a gift for her then-fiancé. He never read the classic novel, but he took the part of Rhett Butler when it became available. He did a fantastic job playing it, but he should have attempted to read the book. Wholesome companions. Despite having a difficult role in personal life, Gable got along quite well with his co-stars in Gone with the Wind. He was very close to Hattie McDaniel, with whom he drank an actual alcoholic drink during a scene shortly after his kid was born. Gable quickly defended McDaniel from racial comments and denounced those who had said them. They battled against segregated facilities on set with McDaniel. When McDaniel's race prevented her from entering the Gone with the Wind premiere, Gable too became dangerously close to walking out. Unsuccessful union with Lombard. Could you remind me of the little point we made before on Gable's capacity for faithfulness? Yes, the dude did it once more. Gable's third marriage to the love of his life was marred by his frequent cheating, and he could not remain true to Lombard. In 1942, he began an affair with Lana Turner, his co-star in the film Somewhere I'll Find You. There was chemistry between the two, both on and off set, which might have been the catalyst for the affair. Producers were so taken by their chemistry that they contracted them to work on a second film together. A tragic accident. Gable had a terrible loss in 1942. Carol Lombard, his third wife, perished in a horrific aircraft accident. Lombard had gone to Indiana to raise money for the Second World War by selling bonds with her mother and a press agent. Gable was allegedly having an affair with Lana Turner, with whom he was filming the first picture next to at the same time. Lombard became aware of the reports and booked a trip home immediately. All 22 passengers perished in the tragic aircraft accident. Getting ready for combat. When he learned of it, Gable was shocked and taken aback by the news. To identify his wife's corpse, his mother-in-law and Lombard's press agent, who had also served as the best man at their wedding, he had to take a plane to the scene of the disaster. Gable decided to spend some time at their ranch to mourn and indulge in copious amounts of alcohol. After he got his act together, he decided to serve in World War II without telling anybody beforehand. Lack of interest in war. After enrolling in the Second World War, Gable was most excited to fight and serve for a few years. However, it was evident that MGM Studios was less than thrilled about one of their biggest movie stars jeopardizing his life in such a manner. Gable was hit by a stray bullet that went through his foot instead of his skull once during a raid in Germany. As soon as MGM Studios learned, they started corresponding and advocating with the U.S. Army in the hopes that they would move Gable to a less demanding position. He had dyslexia. Most people were unaware that Gable was dyslexic for most of his life. At all points, he wished to keep the handicap a secret, out of concern for how it might impact his profession and public perception. Dyslexia may have contributed to Gable's difficulty reading Gone with the Wind, which he struggled with when his wife gave it to him as a gift. Dyslexics find reading words in the correct sequence difficult since they don't appear to make sense. Concerned about his reputation. Gable seemed to be struggling greatly with how his manhood was portrayed. He appeared to be preoccupied with people's perception of his manliness all the time, and as a result, he avoided doing many things that he believed would damage that perception. He felt that being caught reading would devalue his masculinity. Hence, he objected to anyone taking photos of him while reading on movie sets. The severe demands of the day on how men and women carried out their gender roles, which were almost always hyperbolic and unrealistic, may also have contributed to this behavior. Hitler found him appealing. Hitler seems to be a huge admirer of Gable. We're not sure whether this fits under the area of flattery or the exact opposite. He was so fascinated with them that at one time he made a big prize offer to anybody who could catch him and return him to German hands without causing him any damage. That never came to be, but it must have been an intriguing experience for Gable to be sought by one of the worst despots in human history. He renounced his Oscar. Gable did something really strange in 1934. After winning the Oscar for It Happened One Night, he's said to have given it to an entirely unrelated youngster. That child had glanced at him and he thought the statue was beautiful and polished. Gable decided to give the boy his medal because he was more concerned with the prestige of winning than with the statue itself. His family never saw the award again until after his passing because of the unfavorable reaction from the Academy and the general public. Perhaps he revolutionized shirts for men. Gable performed a sequence in his 1934 film It Happened One Night that may have revolutionized the men's shirt business. When Gable's character removes his shirt in the relevant scene, nothing is seen below. The fact that Gable had nothing on below his shirt startled audiences worldwide, with some even letting out loud gasps in the theater. And although the men's undershirt companies did not fail, they saw a steady sales decline. Men also began to wear button-down shirts without undershirts. He shared a home with Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was one of Gable's most cherished longtime companions. The two had plenty of time to form close bonds and a lovely relationship since they were able to collaborate on many films. However, others claim that their relationship was more than simply friendship. Crawford and Gable were said to have gotten along well when Gable took over to support Crawford and keep her company following her 1946 divorce. They even shared a house once to establish their friendship with perks formally. Not a fit. Gable often showed true love for his wives, even though he was married several times. However, he did have one disastrous marriage. 1949 saw him wed British socialite and well-known model Sylvia Lady Ashley. After dating for a time and getting married shortly after, they quickly saw how foolish that choice had been. Gable just examined the surface level of her personality. After 3 years of frequent partying and extravagant spending, he finally had enough and they got divorced. He nearly wed Nancy Davis. It's said that Gable and Nancy Davis came dangerously close to marriage at one time in their lives. Around 1948, it seemed like Gable was smitten with her and was thinking about popping the question. However, the proposal was never made, and Nancy eventually married Ronald Reagan, the future president, shortly after. Nancy went on to become First Lady of the United States, rather than being one of Gable's wives. According to rumors, Gable was pleased that she'd become such a significant character in American history and fully backed her choice. His connection to Grace Kelly. It might be a little challenging to follow Gable's marriages and extramarital relations since they appear very often. However, it seems he had another high-profile romance with Grace Kelly, another of Hollywood's greatest icons. Their romance didn't last long, but they had something going on for a while. The pair opted to end their relationship when the Magambo shooting started, and they never got back together. His quintuplet marriage. After divorcing his fourth spouse in 1955, Gable prepared to enter his fifth and last marriage. Kathleen Williams, an heiress, was courted by him for some time before he decided to pop the question, to which she immediately said yes. He seemed to take great pleasure in being William's stepfather, and since he grew older, he had greater tolerance. It appeared that the King of Hollywood would finally settle down, much to everyone's astonishment. He found satisfaction in settling down with Williams and their kids. Never leaving any heirs behind. Gable was extremely excellent at shielding himself, even though he was married 5 times, had several relationships, and sometimes had a legal relationship and fling. Until his 5th wife eventually fell pregnant, he never had any legitimate children in any of his marriages. The couple was thrilled to finally have their kid, even though they already had her children. William's children were thrilled to hear they'd have a new brother or sister, but sadly, Gable would not get to see his son. His final hours. Gable died abruptly, November 1960, when Williams was just 6 months pregnant. Alongside Marilyn Monroe and Montgomery Clift, the actors were shooting The Misfits. 4 days had passed since the movie's completion when Gable began to feel ill. Gable went on to say that he almost had a heart attack from Monroe. Presumably, he was pointing out to the actress that she was unexpectedly nude in a room scene. Although Monroe felt she was too responsible for the actor's death, Gable was already not doing well. Doctors immediately transported him to the hospital, where they determined that he had a heart attack. When he unexpectedly passed away from an arterial blood clot, he was alive and seemed to be getting better. He never got to see his son. He was 59 years old. Reasons he didn't take Marilyn to bed. According to a recent expose, Clark Gable would never have slept with Marilyn Monroe because she was too unclean for him. A vicious relationship between the two allegedly occurred on the set of The Misfits, just before Gable had a fatal heart attack. In his book, Clark Gable, Tormented Star, David Brett maintains that these stories are untrue. Brett says that Gable's fetish for cleanliness and Monroe's reputation for sloppy personal hygiene prevented him from becoming amorously interested. She suffered from what today would be described as a form of irritable bowel syndrome. Brett writes, quoting to the New York Post, "Like Jean Harlow, she bleached her pubic hair and never wore panties. In addition, Marilyn rarely bathed, slept in the nude, and ate a lot in bed, shoving what was left on her plate under the sheets before going to sleep." Entombed beside Lombard. Gable appeared to have a preference among his spouses, marriages, and divorces. Before his death, he requested that Carol Lombard, his 3rd wife and the love of his life, be buried beside him in the event of the inevitable. By his desires, his 5th wife and her family buried him next to her in the Great Mausoleum in Glendale Forest Lawn Memorial Park. Over 200 individuals attended the funeral, many of them stopping by to pay their respects. His only adopted child. 3 months after his death, Gable's lone legitimate child was born to his final wife, Kathleen Williams. John Clark Gable was the baby's name, and he was delivered to the same hospital where his father had died. Due to his unlucky timing in birth and death, Clark Gable never met any of his grandkids or offspring because he never recognized Judy. John attempted to succeed as an adult actor and even acted in many films, but he never got his big break. In addition, there were some family conflict involving his kids, which was said to demonstrate the awful guy he became as an adult. His namesake grandson passed away. As a model, actor, and television presenter, Clark James Gable, better known as Clark Gable III, the son of John Clark Gable, continued his grandfather's career in entertainment. He was regarded as one of the most attractive guys in the world and in the entertainment business, having presented the TV series Cheaters for 2 seasons. Clark James Gable was discovered unconscious at his Dallas home in February 2019. After being taken to the hospital, he passed away. After an autopsy, it was discovered that he had overdosed due to a combination of oxycodone, fentanyl, and the sedative alprazolam in his system. His passing raised awareness of the widespread opioid epidemic that's only become worse in the U.S. through the 2010s. The Hollywood King. After a few years of his work, Gable gained significant recognition from Hollywood's general public. Gable was adored by both men and women for his sometimes too masculinized parts and the many allusions to him as a macho man, winning over many hearts. He eventually gained the moniker the King of Hollywood, which remained until the day of his death and beyond. Some individuals also think that Gable's death effectively ended the term Golden Age of Hollywood. He wasn't into Gone with the Wind. One must be surprised that Gable was not interested in filming the film, even though Gone with the Wind became his most well-known and well-regarded part. He made a lot of excuses about how much of a woman's picture the movie was, making it exceedingly hard to convince him to play the part. After all, he was used to acting mean and manly. He thus honestly believed that he would destroy his very manly persona when he discovered that he had to maintain his southern accent while engaging in sad love moments with his co-star. His bond with Barrymore. Although they were longtime friends, Gable and theatrical icon Lionel Barrymore's relationship didn't start well. Barrymore is renowned for his extraordinary theater, radio, and film director and actor work. Lionel Barrymore first found Gable to be irritating, disparaging his skill, and asserting that he performed very unprofessionally. Even though Gable took the criticism seriously, they resolved their differences, and Gable finally disproved Barrymore. Given his promise, Barrymore even started pushing Gable to seek a career in theater. Gable attempted diligently to heed Barrymore's counsel, which he much respected.